So I'll be talking about the civilians' perspective on the peace talks in Yemen. And this is based on interviews with over 160 civilians who were and are directly affected by the conflict in 5 governorates, including the capital city of Sana'a, as part of research I have done for the Center for Civilians in Conflict late last year. The interviews showed a deep resentment towards the negotiations, towards the peace talks by the civilians. They said that for these reasons, civilians said that they extremely distrust actors who are currently involved in the talks, all actors. They feel that these actors are only interested in negotiating power at the expense of Yemenis. Some of the civilians even thought that these actors are interested more in sustaining the conflict because they benefit more from the status quo and the continuation of the war. But more importantly, civilians felt that these actors don't represent them. In other words, they felt that they're not represented in the peace negotiations, which brings me to my argument about these peace talks. I think, in my opinion, the UN-led peace talks are deeply flawed. They're elite-centric, they're not inclusive, and they are not built on solid understanding of Yemen's conflict or interpretation of Yemen's conflict. So when it comes to Yemen's conflict, there are 2 main aspects. The first aspect of the conflict is the power struggle among the traditional northern elite and their patronage network. This struggle started in the early 2000s when Saleh started taking steps to solidify power into the hands of his immediate family and prepare his son to become the successor, which angered his allies who thought it was an attempt by Saleh to marginalize them. So this power struggle escalated in 2011 when Saleh's allies, who, by the way, most of them now are on the Hadi camp. It escalated in 2011 when they backed the youth uprising that eventually pushed Saleh out of power. The second and more important aspect and ignored aspect of the Yemen conflict is the local grievances and the deep resentment towards these elite from the majority of Yemenis, because these elite have, over decades, they have hijacked state institutions. They've controlled power and resources and used that to oppress and marginalize the rest of the country. These grievances manifested themselves in the 2011 youth uprising, and they turned into violent or armed resistance in 2014 and 2015. So my analysis is that since 2011, the UN and the international community have been trying to address only the power struggle aspect of the Yemen conflict and widely ignored the underlying grievances. And that's why the transition process and the peace talks failed. Basically, since 2011, the UN peace talks have mainly focused on the elite, the national elite, who are corrupt, who lack legitimacy and influence, who are disconnected from and widely rejected by the Yemeni people, and who are a huge part of the problem. And the talks widely ignored the internal dynamics of the conflict and failed to engage local actors who have influence, who have legitimacy, and who could potentially be part of an important part of the solution. So in my opinion, as long as these national actors have monopoly over the peace process, over the peace talks, Yemen will see no peace. No elite compromise will resolve Yemen conflict. And until we recognize that and act on it, the war will not stop. Thanks.